Really interesting stuff from Kieran McGeeney in the Irish News today. Cahair O'Kane is on the line to talk to us a bit about his story. Good morning to you.
Morning, lads.
Now, I suspect that battle lines are being drawn between the people who hate Kieran McGeeney and who think that he should shut up about stuff like more inter-county games, and the Kieran McGeeneys of this world who actually want to see more matches played at the top level. This is kind of the culture war within GAA at the moment, right?
Sort of, to a point, but I suppose Kieran's point was that you could manage the 14 league games. So he's talking about a double round National League with home and away fixtures, and you could manage that in the same window or thereabouts that exists at the minute for the pre-season competitions and the National League, which takes from the start of January until the start of April, which is around about 12-13 weeks. And if you extend that sort of another week or two, you could basically play 14 week-on-week National League games, which is sort of what he wants to do. But I can understand where that point would come in. Then there'd be a break of a week or two, and then there'd be another break of a week or two, and then the next thing you're in the middle of May and the National League's not read up, and then you're into starting the championship, and it just knocks it back again rather than helping the problem.
Yeah, I mean, obviously this would be a massive increase in the number of inter-county games, which would, let me do the whataboutery, right? What about the elitism? What about the dual player? What about the club player?
The elitism would be a problem because it is a massive number of games. When you're asking fellas 14 league games for the All-Ireland Champions, you're still talking about 5 or 6 championship games, depending on what system it ends up with. And then to ask them to play a reasonable number of club games in a season, maybe 10 or 11, and the like of Monaghan there, where they would play 10 or 11 of their club league games and then play their club championship. Somebody runs on to Ulster and then all that. Somebody puts in 35 games over the course of a season, which is professional soccer sort of standard, and that's a big ask of fellas individually, those elite players. The dual player would be dead. I don't think there'd be any room for him at all. And what was the other one?
What was my third one about? I can't remember.
It wasn't about overtraining, and I think that
I didn't even get there. Yeah, no, elitism, inter-county player,
dual player.
The club player.
The club player sort of covered that in the first point. So
yeah, they're screwed basically.
They're screwed to a point. Like the idea that clubs would have their players for club league games is sort of, it's hanging on by its fingernails in some counties. There are some counties, particularly up here, that are very good at it. Monaghan, Tyrone, just Derry come to example, but there are other counties around the country. I mean, Dublin, as Johnny Cooper said last year, he only played 4 games for his club in the entire year, and I imagine 2 of those were championship games. So, there's where you're at with that, and it certainly wouldn't improve that situation. But then that's something that'll never be improved unless the rules are changed, and that counties are made, put their club players up for selection for a minimum number of club games through the year, which would be, the way of solving that problem, but very hard to police.
I often wondered, is there a set number of games that is a target for a GAA player? For, say, an inter-county player, what is the target number of games that they should play over the course of 12 months? And I'm including club matches in that.
It differs per individual. Like there was one case in Ulster here. I remember a fella who spent 2 years on a county panel and basically played 3 games across those 2 years because he wasn't getting any game time with his county team. And he wasn't then allowed to play for his club, and it just became a mess to the point where he sort of packed it in, and that's the very, very far end of the scale. There are some players like Chrissy McCaig from Slackneil would play every week if he could. He would play every single week and play football on a Wednesday and play hurling on a Saturday. So it does depend on the individual. But
should we have a target in mind, like a general? And agreed, so if you agree that, like, I'm looking at the Leinster Senior League tables, I just looked them up there while you were talking, and Major 1 Saturday, the league table from last year shows that the teams played 22 games. 22 games seems like a fairly active, regular. It's going to be on every Saturday, whatever time those games are on. And then there's obviously cup competition on top of that. So you might play another 5 games if you reach the final. You might play 1 if you get knocked out. So a range between 22 and 30 games a season seems like a really active, vibrant lifestyle, which I think most players would like, right?
Yep, absolutely, and that's one of the points Kieran McGeeney makes, that introducing more National League games and tightening it up a wee bit would basically reduce the training to games ratio that exists at the minute, which can be as high as 6 or 71 in some cases. Where you're training constantly and not playing games, or higher if you're on a subs bench every week. You would want the players to have that bit of freedom to play for their clubs when it's available. But I suppose, as you say, a target of in around, like the counties up here, if you have 15 club league games, a sort of accepted figure would be around about 2/3. If they're playing 2/3 of those games for their club, they're naturally going to miss games because it's inevitable. It's impossible not to. But if you were getting 11 or 12 club games, and in Kieran's idea, 13 or 14 inter-county games maybe across the year, there's 25, 26 over maybe 9 or 10 months, that does seem very acceptable. I'm sure most players would prefer that as to training for 10 months a year and playing 6 or 7 league games and maybe 2 championship games, which is not a great return for the effort that goes in.
McGeeney also makes the point about other sports stealing the limelight for GAA, and then he also goes on to suggest that you could potentially end the championship in July. Now, I know somebody like Colm O'Rourke is very dead set on keeping the football final in September. Obviously, it's gone to August already, so that thing is dead from now already. But do you subscribe to the idea that this is potentially a contradiction for McGeeney, that moving the All-Ireland final forward again could reduce that window when GAA is really in the public spotlight?
I could see the point in terms of the real major focus on those big All-Ireland games at a particular time of year is very useful for the GAA, but at the same time I do feel that those games would kind of sell themselves, because the percentage of the population in Ireland that's involved and interested in those big games, All-Ireland semi-finals wouldn't really need sold in August any differently from July or the end of June. To me, an All-Ireland final would sell out no matter when it was played. And I suppose it comes down to whether the club game, as it is at the minute, gives the GAA enough promotion. And I think through the like of, the AIB's efforts and different things, and TG Cahair obviously showing a lot more of it and giving it a wider profile, the club game has caught up in terms of profile, and the like of the provincial club series and the All-Ireland club series offer good promotion for the GAA, but it wouldn't be on the level of a senior All-Ireland. But it's probably, to me, I think it would be enough. You're maintaining a presence, you're maintaining a media presence on TV, in the papers, on radio all year round. At the minute, if you bring it inside a calendar year, it would still be all year round. So I don't think it's as big. I know Croke Park are obviously naturally concerned by bringing the All-Ireland forward, and it is a move that they maybe didn't necessarily want to make, but it'll be interesting, because I don't think it'll have a massive impact, certainly in terms of participation. Ultimately what you're talking about is participation levels. That's who you're promoting to engage young fellas in games. And are a lot of young fellas not engaged by their own club players, like a Chrissy McCaig, him playing at Emmett Park and Slackneil? Does that not engage fellas every bit as much as Dublin and Kerry would for a young fella in Derry or Tyrone?
I mean, it does. The trouble is that Chrissy is like a Cuchulainn Satanta type figure, and there aren't a million of them.
No, there aren't. Definitely not. But a lot of young fellas, like I understand, like a lot of young fellas dream of playing for their county and grow up, and that's massive. But a lot of young fellas, like, you're brought up by your club, and this is the community you're from, and you grew up wearing that jersey. You grew up, that's actually your community, that's your club and your crest, and you grew up wanting to play for them as much. And I think that that is part of the promotion of it as well. That the argument of taking it out and shortening the inter-county calendar and taking away from the promotion of the games, who are you promoting it to? It's already promoted to the young fellas by the games being played on their own doorstep.
I have a theory about this, that like if you are a young footballer from any county in Leinster outside of Dublin, that the thing that's going to sustain you is playing for your club. That the dream of playing for Kildare, Meath, Westmeath, Longford, Offaly, Laois is not a dream of winning the All-Ireland, because it is completely irrational. Whereas actually the dream of winning the county title is going to be the only thing that sustains you. And whether or not that's good enough in the long run to make sure that the best athletes at 14 and 15 choose Gaelic football over rugby, we'll have to wait and see, because, you know, there's a powerful intoxicant in watching the success of the rugby team at the moment. And I think that's McGeeney's point, is that there can't be complacency when it comes to recruitment of the best players, and that the club system has to prove itself to be a fertile recruitment ground for those players, and to keep those players involved by giving them a programme of games that keeps them enthusiastic, and by offering them the opportunity to express themselves as star footballers, or as footballers who are part of a community and enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a fair point. You know, I've been working on a piece for a couple of weeks on the dropout rates in inter-county football and how they compare now to 10 years ago, and they're kind of holding up all right. And it's interesting. I spoke to the Cavan manager, our former Cavan manager, Terry Hyland, about it, and he spoke about that success, you know, needing success to keep fellas interested in any county. And he said, you know, it's not the majority. The majority of players, all right, they'd probably love to walk away with a medal, but it's not the only concern they have when they're playing for their county. It's the pride, it's the, you know, the personal, maybe a personal gain or a personal pride as well in playing for your county. So there's more to it than simply winning medals. But I absolutely take the point that, and as Terry Hyland says, for a minority, that there is that absolutely. When you go 3 or 4 years where you don't make an Ulster final, or you don't get anywhere near it, and you start to think, you know, this is never going to happen. And by year 6, you're gone. You're 27, and you're retired from inter-county football effectively, and it is happening more and more. And you maybe are losing a percentage of, you naturally are losing fellas younger because of the commitment involved now, and it's becoming trickier to keep them. But they naturally gravitate, when they finish inter-county football, they naturally gravitate back towards their clubs, and I think the interest and the want to play for their county will still exist, as you make the point of the counties around Dublin and Leinster. And maybe long term, absolutely, if Dublin keep winning Leinster and keep winning it, and in 15 years' time they're still winning it, then this generation of young fellas will have said, you know, this is not for me to be playing for Offaly or for Kildare or whoever. But as it stands, I think it's on solid enough ground. But obviously that's the argument over the tiered championship. Like, I spoke to Armagh fullback Brenton Donaghy the other day, and the line he used was the thought of a B championship turned to stomach, which, you know, he says nobody grows up wanting to play in a B championship, and basically the idea was an insult to players from every county. So you imagine. I know, but that's the mentality. You know, Armagh are Division 3 at the minute. They haven't won Ulster since what, 2000 or 99, or sorry, mid 2000s. You know, but that's still their mentality, that they believe that they can compete with anybody. You know, 10 years since they've actually won anything. So, and what I find talking to a lot of players is that's the mentality of a lot of them. You know, even, you know, we would chat to a lot of fellas in Antrim here, and spoke to Patrick McBride a few weeks ago, and he said that, you know, he would rather have that one chance of getting a second round qualifier draw against Mayo in Castlebar maybe some year in the next 10 years than he would want to win a B championship. So I suppose that's the GPA's point, that the players need to listen to, and Pádraig Duffy's point has been that the players need to listen to, and when you do listen to them, I think there is a consensus that they don't really want it.
Just one last point on that, and it's kind of on the powerful intoxicant point that Ger made previously, just around the Grand Slam and stuff like that in rugby. Like, the only kind of thing you could equate to that in GAA really is big days in Croke Park. And I take your point that the participation rates are impacted by seeing lads in your own club doing well for the club. But is there not a kind of a sense about widespread hysteria in a county when they're going to Croke Park and they're about to win something, and potentially in a football competition that replicates the Joe McDonagh Cup, there might be more potential for that in weaker counties? And of course there is that progression, and it comes back to this idea that the B Championship label is the thing that is wrong with this the most. But I still think there's a huge room for this, for counties from weaker areas to actually get to Croke Park, to have some sort of end goal that is providing that intoxicant for the young kids going along to Croke Park.
I would kind of arguing the opposite. I have always kind of been in favour of splitting the championships, because the idea of some of the counties in Division 4 winning in All Ireland is completely unrealistic, and to give them something to work towards. But you only need to look, for me the prime example is the Division 3 and Division 4 National League finals last year, which were in Croke Park. You know, counties that don't often maybe get to play there, don't often win silverware, and I think the total attendance was 5,000. You know, and that is ultimately the bottom line for a lot of those counties, the absolute fear that they're going to end up playing their championship games in front of 700 or 800 people. Whereas no matter how the last year went or how the last 10 years have gone, we're still hopelessly romantic in the sense that you always hope, and your fans always hope that you might do it this year. You know, we could take Armagh, or we could take Tyrone, or, you know, and they turn out in their thousands, and there's 15,000, 16,000 at every championship game at least up here, and the big fear is that would disappear, because the promotion of the games, you put Dublin and Mayo on the same weekend as you put Armagh and Fermanagh, and which gets all the media coverage, which is covering pages and radio stations and TV for the week running in, and which is live on TV. You know, this is the fear that those counties have, and I can absolutely see why they have it.
Yeah, I think there's ways around that. We're going to talk about this a good bit more next week in terms of a suggested structure for how a championship/league might work, but we'll definitely bring you a bit in on that conversation. It's great stuff with McGeeney, by the way. My whataboutery notwithstanding, I was being totally facetious about that. I think it's really interesting when somebody like McGeeney comes out and makes the case for more inter-county matches, that actually this would help to rebalance it, and he's very interesting on how people outside the system don't really understand that the training is actually enjoyable and that the players aren't indentured slaves. I think McGeeney might have had a few people in mind when he was talking to you specifically.
Possibly. Who uses phrases like indentured slaves?
Well, there you go. Cahair, good stuff. Thanks a million.
Thanks, lads.
Hey, hope you enjoyed that latest offering from Off the Ball. If you want to subscribe, and you should, check out just up here. All our latest stuff is just down here. Generally, knock yourself out.